thought of this guy sitting in a dining table with his family, kids and wife, and everyone's stressed because he's lost his job, nothing's spoken, there's tension in that table, and that continues for days. And I said, if I can do something out there to kind of just help lift the mood, because if this person gets into the right frame of mind, he or she can go out and really do brilliant things because he or she has done brilliant things. And that then moved me closer towards creating this course.
This is Safe Passage, where we invite you to explore the internal journey of transformation and change.
Whether it's relocation or retirement, the birth of a child or the loss of a loved one, life invites us, sometimes forces us, to evolve.
So where do you turn when you feel stuck or unsure of what's next? I'm Doug Oda.
And I'm Nikki Muller. Welcome to Safe Passage.
You only have to look at the future of work and the people who carry out this work to understand that the speed of change is propelling employees into navigating more transitions with more intensity than ever before. Whether we actively seek a change or are beginning to sense a deep need to forge a different path, career transitions involve far more than simply the act of finding a new job. It's an often uncomfortable but profoundly gratifying journey of self-discovery, where we explore new possibilities and test unfamiliar identities before embarking on the next chapter with confidence. But few people are talking openly about the discomfort or dare to acknowledge their difficulties publicly. The stress of holding on to a job or the fear of facing the unknown often outweighs our internal beliefs that there could be more to our working lives than the one we've carved out for ourselves. And yet, ever since the pandemic threw what we knew about how, where, and with whom we work into a tailspin, more people want to take control of their work lives. And this is why I can't think of a better guest to have a chat with today than Sharad Lal. Oh my goodness. Thank you for being here, Sharad.
Thank you, Nikki, for inviting me. And what a lovely intro. You always have a way with words and you've described the situation so well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I've been looking forward to this conversation for such a long time. I managed to get into Sharad Lal's calendar, folks. And here's why I'm so glad that he's with us. He's developed his leadership skills at Procter & Gamble and Boston Consulting Group. He scaled 6 companies in over 2 decades, including the sale of a digital agency to a global leader. But what really lights him up? Well, he's also a life coach who's supported thousands of people in creating purposeful and successful lives. Sharad, I first met you when you gave me a shot and you reached out to me on your own podcast, How to Live, which is ranked top 3 globally, top 3%, I should say, globally, all around the world. And that's kind of how we met. And I haven't seen you in a very long time, but I know you're doing incredible things around the world of transitions.
Absolutely, Nikki. Good to be reconnected. And that was such a lovely conversation on Third Culture Kids. And true to Third Culture Kid life, you are living that life now. You're in Zurich, you're in Singapore now. But good to see you and be connected again.
Yes, I appreciate that. And I think it's important I tell everybody who's listening here today that it was actually Sharad who planted the seed in my next step to discovering what this new chapter of my work life could look like. Sharad, you gave me 2 ideas. You said, well, you're talking about Third Culture Kids. And I was interested in talking about something broader, though, of course, I'm very interested in the TCK community and very active. And you said, belonging and transitions. To be honest, I had no idea what you meant by transitions until it slowly, naturally unfolded. That must happen to you all the time where you say something, people look at you and go, no idea. And then the penny drops. That happens to you, doesn't it?
That happens to me. That happens when I speak to someone, because sometimes when someone just says something and, it sparks, it's the time that you need those words, and then it sparks a journey of figuring that out for yourself.
And that's why I will never forget you. I will never forget you, Sharad. And listen, and since I last saw you, you've created what is often a sold-out career transitions program, which I'm currently still on the wait list for, Thrive Through Transition. What compelled you to create this? What was the catalyst?
So I think this took a while. It was coming for a time. And if there are 2 moments that I remember well, I was listening to Lex Friedman. He has a podcast, really big podcast, and he was actually interviewing a very controversial figure, was the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. And that was like a 4-hour conversation. So I recommend you listen to that. That's such a good conversation, even your listeners. And Prime Minister Modi was talking about this whole thing of what's the problem in the world I need to solve. And that's the lens through which he was operating. And I found that framing at that, like you said, sometimes like a simple thing said to you at a certain point of time opens things up. And that opened things up to me that what is the big problem in this world that I want to solve? And this came to me where folks in their 30s and 40s, sometimes due to compulsion, are looking at their next stage in career. They may be let go or restructuring, or sometimes they're proactively thinking of what to do. And if I can help people at that stage figure out the next stage, I think that is what my ultimate purpose could be. And, I was doing pieces around this. So I was doing stuff on purpose, which is related to this. I was doing stuff around change and transition, which is related to this. And I was also doing work on resilience. So all these things then came together. So intellectually, this sounded like something very interesting that I wanted to do. So I got excited, but then I forgot about it for 6 months.
Which often is the case. It needs time to breathe.
Excited and then forgot about it. And then a visual came to me, which was very powerful. I thought about the person, like I'm a man, like if I were to lose a really big job, and I thought of this guy sitting in a dining table with his family, kids and wife, and everyone's stressed because he's lost his job, nothing's spoken, there's tension in that table, and that continues for days. And I said, if I can do something out there to kind of just help lift the mood, because if this person gets into the right frame of mind, he or she can go out and really do brilliant things because he or she has done brilliant things. And that then moved me closer towards creating this course.
Which is wonderful because in a way it was an amalgam of all the different skills and the life path that you've already accumulated and all these wonderful experiences, and then curating something that is so valuable for people, especially in this day and age where there is so much uncertainty and market uncertainty. So I think it's wonderful, which is why I'm on the wait list, but I know I'll get in. Folks, pray for me. It's a good thing.
I look forward to. Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to learn a lot. And we'll talk about some of the elements that, of course, you have in your course through this conversation. Sure. But I'm wondering about some context, the kinds of people and situations that they're in. When they come to you for guidance and support, what are those feelings? What are these burning questions that they have when they say, Sharad, help? Please help.
So there are two types of people. Some who are like forced into this by unfortunate things that they did not see, like they've been maybe let go or, something bad has happened and they really want to get back to work. So that's one set of people. And the second set is they might see the writing on the wall, or maybe they've taken a career break, or maybe, you have kids and want to come back to work. So it's not a very urgent need, but they still want to figure out a systematic way to go about it. I've seen in both, the starting point is overwhelm. Don't know what to do. It's a lot more with the people who, of course, been let go, because there's a lot of other emotions on top of overwhelm, because you may be angry and other things, and things are unfair and all those things. But even with the other person who's trying to figure out the next stage after having done something maybe for 20 years, or maybe coming back after a break, figuring out where to start. What do I do? I'm talking to people. They say, look at your strengths. Somebody said you should be doing this. Somebody said something else. I am confused and overwhelmed. So that is where most people start off. And then my job is to help them move towards some level of clarity and also feeling a little good and not that stressed about it. And if I can do that, that's where I think I've done my job.
Oh my gosh, that's music to my ears. I mean, I'm nodding because I go, whoa, that was me not so long ago. And I mean, really not so long ago. I'm saying I've probably only come through the middle of the transition maybe a month ago. So I completely resonate with that. And of course, you had alluded to this vision that you had, or the visual that you had of someone sitting at the dining table. And because this is the reality now, right? I mean, I'm going to just talk about a data point. This was from 2 years ago. And I'm sure now that the rate has accelerated significantly, because there's a survey. LinkedIn and Microsoft did a survey of 30,000 people across 30 countries. And And they found that almost half were actually considering quitting, right? So there is what we're seeing in the market now, which is massive layoffs across industries, and we'll talk about that. But there's also the developmental transition when people are considering this new move and actually would if the timing was right? I mean, I know in the USA, the quit rate was about 1 million people per week, and various reasons that were cited. It was the lack of upward mobility or inadequate pay, work-life balance, toxic work environments. And like I said, we're at the same time, we're seeing huge layoffs across all industries. And that causes massive fear for those who still have a job that they might not have it for much longer. And from what I'm studying, that there's two factors that affect whether we resist or lean into a big change, and that is choice and desire, right? Did you choose this or was it done to you? Do you want this or was this put on you? So I'm wondering about some consistent reactions that you're seeing from people who've actually lost their jobs. I think I heard this in one of your podcasts. You had two very specific observations.
So I think this is very interesting phrasing around choice and desire. In choice, your mental state is still okay, but the danger is too many options and anxiety, and then you don't move. Because you do have choices, but then, I can do this, I can do that, that itself, there's this whole
it's
concept
overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. There's this whole concept of paradox of choice. When you have so many choices, you want to make sure you take the optimal decision, and taking the optimal decision generally never happens, because of which you keep searching and make it anxious. So depending on your mental state, choice can be bad as well. When you don't have a choice, it can also be bad because there is, like you said, you're facing rejection. You're facing, like a lot of people, there's so many stories that they share when they do the course. So the course is a lot about even talking and opening up and processing what you're going through. And a lot of people talk about the stories around loyalty, how they gave themselves to the company and the culture and what they were promised. And then they understood the rationale of why it happened, because they understand costs going out of whack. But at some level, they felt there was something unfair in the way it happened. They were treated badly, and there's no good way of doing it. So I don't blame the employer or the person losing their job, but what it creates in the person who's been let go is this heavy feeling of either inadequacy or anger or loss of identity or loss of confidence. And that itself, unless it's processed, can stick with a person for a long time. And getting out of that rut and getting out of that mind space and headspace takes a long time.
Yeah, I think we often try to rush endings, right? And for various reasons. Sometimes you say, well, I need to find a new job now. I can't process. I don't have time to process how hard this was, how angry I am. But these emotions don't go anywhere else, right? If you don't go through that journey of letting go, of almost grieving, because it is a death of sorts when you lose a job or your identity. And it is a death of sorts. And if we try to rush that, what are the dangers of rushing through that process?
So the thing is, I would say as we do it, there are two parts to it. There's a healing part. And sometimes the reality is some people have to start earning reasonably quickly because, especially in Singapore, you were there, like a lot of people, the expenses are high, so their income is important. So I like having this, maybe it's okay for you to put a Band-Aid and go quickly out there as well. But parallelly, you need to do this work of, we talked about getting the emotions out, healing, processing it, because that's the reality of life. And like you said, your question was, if you don't do that, what happens? The issue is that it does not show up like you might look like you're stressed, but it does not show up in obvious ways. It could be anger towards your spouse, anger towards the world, sometimes just short temper and losing it with your kids, or withdrawal. So some people can go on the offensive with like they say, fight or flight. You could go fighting and a little more aggressive, or you could completely withdraw and go into a downward spiral of withdrawing and just moving away from the world. So either cases, it's bad. My opinion is that is deep work which needs to be done. And in case there's a practical thing, yes, do that, because then there are two parts to it. The short term, just processing your grief and going quickly, but also on the side, working towards, I call it like two systems, working towards a longer term of processing it. It could take 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. You could be in your next job if you're lucky, but still that processing is important because if you don't do it, it has a lot of repercussions in your identity, confidence, and how you show up.
Absolutely. And, I always quote William Bridges' statement that the transitions begins with an ending and ends with a beginning, right? And it's really understanding. Isn't that beautiful? It makes sense. Everything is about an ending in a way, and you have to mourn that loss as you go through this journey. And unfortunately, it takes as long as it takes. It's extremely inconvenient. And that's the frustration. And I think this is why we really ought to seek support through transition. I mean, this is what this is all about. This is what this podcast is about, is recognizing when you're in it, being aware of what that feels like, whether it's anger, whether it's nerves, whether it's confusion and uncertainty, all of the things. These are all very, very sticky emotions and sentiments that come up, and then going out and seeking the right support. Because I know a lot of people, and I myself included, I tend to retreat. When it's really hard and I don't know what to do next, I go inward. When really social support and guidance would really help you. It's so hard to do that alone. We are social beings, right? If we try to figure it all out ourselves, I think the chances of that being successful are minimal, would you say?
Absolutely. I love what you said. And one of the things that happens when people join the course is we talk about how everyone's feeling, and we do that for a while. And when they see everyone else is going through the same thing, that itself is an aha. There's different ways in which people come to it, but it's the same overwhelm, anger, bitterness, like all kinds of things. That itself, like you said, is a huge thing, that this is normal. This is okay. Many others are going through it. In a way, even though I feel lonely, I'm also connected to so many others who are going through it. So that itself is huge. And even for me, as someone who was always trying to solve stuff, I realized the importance of validation versus solving. So you're not going to solve the problem, but if you can validate it, which might mean holding the space, letting people talk, telling people it's okay, not that it's good or bad, but it's okay, it's normal, they see it from others. And once you feel validated, validation is such a big superpower right now. You feel it's fine. And maybe you start moving forward a little bit.
Yeah, because your nervous system all of a sudden goes, oh, I'm being recognized. I'm being seen, heard, understood.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, Dan Siegel had said something. So he's a scientist, a neuroscientist. He talked about this concept of name it to tame it. So the moment you accurately name an emotion, right, it reduces the intensity by something 100%. Like 50%. And that's, I think, what you're talking about.
100%.
That's such an amazing feeling. Yeah. But you know what? Even if the change is positive, or it's a choice that you made for yourself, such as for me, 15 years in Singapore with a very different career path and a network I was very proud of, to begin again halfway across the world. In a transition of, okay, I'm not going to have income for a while. Let's hope it comes to me quickly.
I'm sure it will.
It can still be disorienting, right? Even if you chose it.
And I also chose a different path, which again is, like you said, it is scary because sometimes it feels like I'll tell you a few things that I feel, which I've also seen other people feel. One is, maybe there's some motivation that comes to you over a period of time, but then operationalizing it is difficult. Like when you actually think that, hey, I want to do this, like I talked about, I want to do this course, but putting it in place, how do I do it? Then it comes down to business and things that you may or may not like, where you face challenges. Second, a lot of us, you've done very well, we've achieved a lot. When we're reinventing ourselves, we go into areas where we feel like a novice. And then we see people who may be starting out, who to those people, these things come a lot easier. Let's say certain things come easier, but you're used to, operating at a certain other level. And suddenly you feel like a novice. Things are not working easily. Everyone else is learning it quickly. You're used to learning things well, people looking up to you. That is very disconcerting. And that's fighting through that ego, that, to go through it, because I think that's a big one, feeling like a novice. And how do you manage that? And then once you feel
it's humbling.
It's humbling. It's absolutely humbling. So it's like an act of, all right, you feel like a novice, you do the difficult stuff, But at the same time that this is happening internally, externally, a lot of us have to keep this image of, oh no, we're doing really well. And this may not be strategically even for, our friends and we want to feel good about it, but it could be for people we work with, because no one wants to work with someone who's not feeling like, everyone says, yes, we want to be vulnerable, but try going to a big company and say, hey, I want to do some leadership courses with someone who is vulnerable. They want someone who's like a superstar, who knows everything, who's doing it well. So there are two things that go on. There's a story that you tell others, and there's a story that you put out, and there's a story that you tell yourself. And it is okay for that not to be the same story, because the story that's going out is strategic. And it's not just strategic from an image that makes your ego feel good, but it's strategic from the sense of getting work, being looked at as a sought after person. People want to work with, people look at successful people. And then the story that you tell yourself is, damn, I can't do this. How am I going to do it? These simple people are doing it. That is another story which you need to be honest with yourself. And the balancing act, I think, between these two stories is what makes it difficult, even though you may have chosen to do it, but you're choosing a different path. You're reinventing and evolving and becoming someone else.
Yeah. I can't express how validated I feel right now by your mentioning these things, and I'm sure everyone listening is going, "Aha, yes, absolutely." And yeah, when you have in the outward world have to project positive and in business as usual, whilst your internal world might be the complete antithesis. It's knowing that they can exist in tandem for a while. Eventually, however, that becomes unsustainable, right? I think eventually that becomes unsustainable. But what I'm noticing about living through a transition that I chose for myself, and this was so shocking for me, and my friends go, I can't believe you were shocked, Nikki. You didn't think you would go through this? No, I didn't, because as a third culture kid, I said, I've done this so many times before. I put my life, go from UN civil servant to TV presenter. What's the difference now? But this feeling of that lack of mojo, it's gone. Confidence out the table. In fact, I worked with a therapist for a while because I had experienced something called executive dysfunction, right? So with all the stress that was going through the transition of a new country, and not just a new career path, but a new country and a language that I'm half Swiss, but wasn't quite familiar with or proficient in, everything changing all at once, doing basic things, crossing the road, going to the grocery, turning on the car, couldn't do it. That was the stress of transition that was, one, without the awareness of it, and two, without the support. So even when you make a choice, it's still going to be hard. But I don't want to freak people out. And they're going to say, hey, I better not change anything. I'll become like Nikki, cannot. No, it's not that. It's that's why it's so important to receive support. So I'm wondering for you, because you've gone through quite a few transitions yourself, was there ever a moment where you felt similar or anything that was overwhelming?
Always. Even now, sometimes when I'm like pitching for certain type of work, I do feel overwhelmed, because in this business, you have to show that you're really good. But sometimes you question, is it okay? Sometimes you're judged by people who maybe in your previous life, you were judging people who were their bosses, and now they're judging you. So you need to be able to take that, because that's part of it. But at the same time, you need to go on and be dignified and move through. There's also this whole thing of not being too desperate.
I've heard you talk about that.
Yeah, sometimes you can get into this whole desperation energy, and maybe that's happening inside, but how do you still remain calm and dignified outside? So these kind of things keep happening all the time from a business standpoint. There's another thing that also keeps happening, like sometimes you start with a certain purpose in mind, and as you make it operational, things shift and change, and you shift and change, and then it tweaks, because purpose that you think about sitting under a tree, a beautiful thought, and putting it in life are very different. And it could go through some changes, which is actually a good process. So I want people to think it's not really a bad process, because you're operationalizing. And each time you're operationalizing, you're asking hard questions, you're tweaking, you're doing it. It's good to do it consciously, but sometimes then you go too far away. So for me, there's another battle of my commercial mind versus my deep purpose-oriented mind. And earlier I used to think the commercial mind is the bad guy and this is the good person. But then I realized they're both no, none of them is good or bad. That's a great kind of seesaw to keep juggling all the time to figuring out where you want to go. And that is a normal process. So that's another juggling act that one has to do. And then there's also the life canvas because of options. Like maybe work is meaningful, but what about life? Are you getting too stretched? Like I have 2 little daughters. I want to spend time with them. Am I in the right frame of doing it? So there is a lot of balancing and tweaking and shaping and designing along with the fears and the nervousness and the anxiety, which is rites of passage. And at 40, it's all amplified. It's 20s, you're foolish. You don't know a thing. It's so easy to do stuff. I should not say that, but relative to 40s, it's easier to do things. 40s, oh my God, there's so much at stake. There's responsibility.
Yes.
You have an identity. Now you're expected to do well from yourself, from others, and you feel like a novice, but still you are doing well and shifting tracks. It is difficult.
It is. And I'm so glad you brought up the 40s. That was my next question for you, because I mean, that's something we both align on in terms of research. It's that in midlife, that's when these feelings really start to show up in significant ways and they become intensified. You mentioned 20s, right? That's kind of when you're out of college, maybe if you went to college and you want to prove yourself and you want to get those results. And then in your 30s, you're building off that reputation. You have a bit of a track record, maybe some accolades and extra responsibility. And then somehow we hit our 40s. And from what I'm noticing, a lot of us start to question not just what we do, but why we do it, right? And I felt that in my late 30s. And it's still such an incredibly frightening and difficult space to navigate, especially in midlife. And you have some really interesting things to say about that. What exactly is it about the 40s and in midlife? Why is it harder to make that change or that transition if we've done it before in our 20s and 30s?
I think life is laid out well up to the 40s, in my view. Like you have school, you do well, you get some accolades, similar things in college, at work. And then when you've been working for, let's say, 20 years, and even if you're in one job or if you've gone to different jobs, at some stage you realize that, is this it? Like, am I just supposed to keep working? Like, what is the plan from here? There's no real transition plan. And a lot of us then realize that, hey, it's not like we're going to retire in a few years. Many of us don't. Many of us will work till our 75, 80s because life expectancy is going up. We're healthier. We've got more wisdom. So if you have like 20, 30 years more to work when we're in our 40s, what are we going to do? We've kind of almost burning out. It's not the end of the line, it's midway. And that is when people start whether thinking about it this way or thinking about their own morality that maybe have lesser years to live than I, have already lived, whatever the question is, they start asking, what am I doing in life? You said the why question. Why am I doing this? What really is important? And then I see people go in different ways. And sometimes then they look at, all right, I need a purpose. So what is a purpose? And often people, and maybe we can talk a little bit about purpose if you want. Like often people then
please
start thinking about, hey, I need to find this one big calling in life. What is this one calling? And I used to think about it that way, but then the more I went into it, I realized that, no, I don't think there's that one calling, because that firstly puts a lot of pressure on figuring that out. And second, as human beings, like we have multiple, maybe it's intellectual stimulation, we have multiple faculties, we have multiple things that we can do. And I can go deeper into that, but if we think about it as this one earth-shattering thing, I think it does not let us move because nothing seems that big. Then sometimes we say, all right, if that's not it, then let me see what is the good I can do. So let me see the list of causes out there. Should I go after climate? Should I go after women? We go through a list of causes thinking that is what we want to do. Now, of course, if something we're passionate about, that's different. But if you're coming from a lens of, I want to do good because that is what, my life right now is, I find that is not sustainable because that's external causes or external stuff. At some stage, we clear out all this noise, this illusion of purpose, and we go deeper and figure out what truly matters. And maybe it's simple things. Maybe it's like teaching. Maybe it's like connecting with people and having good conversation. Maybe it's being with our kids or whatever that is. And that becomes purpose. And often, like whenever I worked with so many people, it's simple things. It's creating a life doing simple things, which bring meaning and purpose to life. And then you start figuring out how do you create a life around that. And to me, that is a better path, because then you can move forward. You can find the joy, like the cliche, just in simple everyday things that you're already doing. You can find the joy in it. You can shift life, tweak it a little bit here and there, and it already becomes purposeful. So it's not this big thing, in my view, that you need to go after.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think there's different ways and iterations in which we can experiment, because there are a few people who might be in a job right now and they can already feel that developmental transition, the fact that they're shifting internally, something is changing, they are changing, but they're not quite sure what it is they want to do next and what that purpose is. And then you might say, well, I don't want to quit this job to find my purpose. I need to keep this job whilst experimenting with what else is out there, right? And it could be getting involved more in the community at work. There are various groups that you can get involved in, and there are, do we have enough time? That's another thing. We have more than one job, if ever. If you really think about it, you are, father, and then maybe entrepreneur on the side, and then you're a volunteer on this side. Plus, you have your full-time job. There's a lot going on, but making a little bit of room for curiosity, I think, and saying, okay, I'll try this. Oh, that wasn't quite for me. Try this. You have to experiment. You have to test. It's not like you're going to wake up one morning with this light bulb moment, right? Very rarely that actually happens.
I love that, Nikki. I completely believe in that. I believe that purpose is not found sitting under a tree. Maybe there's some inspiration, but what you talked about, which is the way the startups also work, it's a complete iterative process. You try something, you learn something, and you shift it around. And maybe I can share a little bit about my iterative journey on how I've kind of gone and tweaked it. So it was like 10, 12 years back, I got into coaching, life coaching, and I was doing it parallelly to my business. And I thought, this is what I want to do because I love it. But as I started imagining, and I'll give you a summary version of the story, as I started imagining myself just doing this one-on-one sitting in rooms, while I enjoyed the sessions, a lot of my personality missed out on interaction with many people. I like more people. I like many people. So a life of just sitting in a room did not work well as I thought about practically my purpose. So then, later on I thought, let me do a podcast, which got me an opportunity to talk in front of people. I never knew you could talk, and that also is a profession. So having talked about purpose, I got more opportunities, and I said, I love this. This is a great place to be in. But then there was some growth that was needed, because I would talk in BCG style frameworks, and they're like, stories are more important. So there was a growth on going around stories. And then I thought I want to do keynotes, but then the keynote life looked like I'm going to travel multiple countries, because you can't be just doing keynotes in Singapore. If you do keynotes, you need to travel around the world. And to me, with my kids, that's not something I wanted to do. And I didn't want to have like multiple clients going all over the place. So I thought, okay, maybe it's programs and deeper work versus just workshops, versus just keynotes. So that led to programs and workshops. So that way, over 10 to 12 years, through testing and iterating and testing and iterating and shifting, I'm kind of figuring my way out. Now, maybe there's something else that comes in later, but it's always the process of shifting and changing, because you are changing, the world is changing, and it's all about, shifting along with that to figure out what is really working for you at any point of time.
Yes. So you test, and then sometimes it is a process of elimination. I used to say that a lot. When people, the overwhelm of asking a 17-year-old what they want to do with their life. I said, well, you know what? I know what I don't want to do. And that's a start.
That's a great start.
And I said, that's a really
start.
good start, right? And with these examples you've given, is okay, if I do the keynote route, yes, that's wonderful, and you can affect a lot of change, and that's a lot of confidence building and reputation building as a thought leader, which you are. But that means time away from your family. So you start to realize, okay, these are really important to me. These are my non-negotiables, right? And that brings me to something that Bruce Feiler, the great transitions expert, said, and that really landed for me. He said, the biggest impediment to a meaningful life is not what you don't know about work, but what you don't know about yourself. That was like, oh, okay, because there is the deep work, and we're alluding to that, right? Quite a bit, that there is the intellectual capacity of what we can and cannot do with logistics, etc. And okay, what really lands for me, right? Who am I now? As you said, we're always changing, and who we are in our 40s is, oh my God, if I look back at my 20s, she was a totally wild child.
Yeah.
My gosh, I kind of admire the 20-year-old, 25-year-old me. Just went for it, right? Like the risks that we're willing to take when we're younger and why that is. And so where we are now, you do have to do a bit of introspection and reflection, but not over analyze, because my dad always says analysis leads to paralysis. He always says that to me, right? Yeah. So the awareness and support for transition is what really can shed light on who you're becoming and what is a good fit for your next chapter. And Sharad, you've given us a really, really great example of how you did that over 10 to 12 years by experimenting and trying. And always with such a positive attitude. Sharad smiles all the time. It is so disarming. It's so warm. I mean, if all anyone has to do is sit with you and just feel, okay, everything's fine. I mean, that's a gift, Sharad, by the way.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you've been told this before, especially when things are hard, you want someone there who just, again, can hold space just by being there, which is wonderful.
I think absolutely. Holding space is big. And I just a little bit double click on the point that you made about Bruce, and you talked about it even earlier. This is a process of knowing yourself. Like you said, every time when we are making these hard choices, we are figuring out what really is important when the rubber hits the ground. Is it time with a family or meaningful work? And that's part of the thing that we do in the course as well, where we're looking at clarity. It is easy to have a whole list of clarity, meaningful work, plus this, plus that, plus everything else. But then it's asking that big questions. Some of these things clash. If you have a choice between doing really good, meaningful work, but you have no space for anything else, versus work that's not good, but then you have flexibility, what would you take? So through this, a lot of things get clarified. And for me, by the way, if I really reflect and look back at life, there was a stage towards the 2015 to 2018 when I had my business, where the business was an autopilot. It wasn't that I was doing meaningful work. That was my biggest developmental, purposeful time, because I did not have too much stress. I could go back and read, and I read all I could on spirituality, philosophy, psychology. I had the brain space to do that. I was urging to do it, the yoga, meditation, and I learned a lot. But it did not happen at work. So templates could look differently. Maybe work is just normal, not very exciting, but controllable. You have your time, and purpose comes from elsewhere. So the models are many. And it's about this whole clarity mapping is about figuring out what really is important and how are you then going to structure this whole canvas of life, not just work. Work is one part of it, life. And you could get things that you get out of work, which is intellectual stimulation or solving problems, etc., outside as well. You could get growth outside as well. So there are different models that exist for different people depending on where you are, who you are, what your circumstances are.
Oh, that's so beautifully said. Thank you so much for that, Sharad. You know, I think, at least from what I'm researching, it's not always that people lack the courage or aren't aware of what their current work life could aren't aware that their current work life isn't working out for them, right? But it's what holds them back is not knowing what to do instead. I think, you know, we've touched on this quite a bit, and that's a huge theme of transitions, is this idea of identity. And I'd love to plunge into that a little bit deeper with you, because I think it's very, very important. And there's this phenomenon known as identity paralysis also, right? And it happens to a lot of us when we face major change or a massive disruption, or if we're thinking about a big change and we're not sure about what's next. We question a lot who we are with or without this role, right? And who we are and what we do is called into question. Who am I without this job? What am I going to do next? If I am not the job, a lot of us start to connect what we do with who we are, and that's where this identity can really be challenged. Could you share a little bit more about that? Because you've had your own fair of transitions as well. You must have faced identity in different ways.
Always. So before going to identity, I'll just go a little bit, which is related to identity, that how do you move? Like we're here, we know this is not working, but we don't know what point B is. So how do we move to point B? I think a lot of us want to move if we have a destination in mind. So if this is not right for me, what is right for me? If I haven't figured that out, I'm just going to do what I'm doing. Now, the issue with that is your discovering point B comes through doing. comes through moving. So even if things are not right and you don't know where to go, I would always encourage people, like we talked earlier, to experiment, try something else. Maybe
Yes.
something's coming up. Maybe it's about speaking. Try speaking somewhere else. Maybe go into a podcast. Try something, because it starts giving you more and more ideas on the destination. You need not quit what you're doing, but if you have some time, you can get more information and data points about yourself, because that is the best way of clarifying what life should look like. Now, relating that to identity, I think what stops us sometimes doing it is, I think I may have said a little earlier, where identity is to do with ego, which is to do with a certain success that you've reached. And when we're trying something else, which is unknown, first, we don't know what to call ourselves, because we're like a work in progress kind of a thing. So there's no word to call ourselves. Second, we're used to, like, in our 40s, there are people looking up to you. Maybe your kids look up to you. Your people who work with you look up to you. And suddenly they see you in this zone where you're not sure what you're doing. Things are not working out right to you. That takes a big toll on self-worth, because we start thinking of identity as self-worth, and that takes a big toll. So that's a real problem. The way I've kind of looked at it is, it's important to still safeguard, especially when you're a high performer, it's important to still safeguard things that make you great and a little bit of that story, because it just is important. Like, it's you still, like, it's not like in your 20s where you can just, go anywhere and it doesn't matter. But in 40s, if you built up something, losing your identity could feel like you're losing everything. So you could keep a bit of that while you're experimenting on the side. And then when you're ready to transition fully, you could reveal the identity. So maybe it's a way of strategically holding on to something, especially if you're a high performer. You don't want to, not everyone should be vulnerable all the time. I think there's certain things we can be vulnerable. Maybe we can be vulnerable in private, but we can still hold a strong stance in public if we like to. While we're shifting, experimenting, trying, one-on-one, we can be like the people who I've seen do very well is, especially in one-on-one, they're really looking at feedback. These could be top leaders. They're really looking at learning from younger people. You may not put it out in a public forum to do that, because there's a certain respect associated with you, and people are not used to seeing you being like, oh my God, this guy doesn't have it sorted. What is going to happen to us? So that is still okay to have that, strong image outside. But if you're able to figure out things of feedback, learning, growth, etc., on the side while you keep your identity reasonably okay and then shift it, I think it's all right.
Absolutely. And I think for me, one of the tips that I have when you're in transition from one identity or role or idea of self to the next is to actually keep doing the things that you feel you're really good at. Maybe you can scale back if that's what's caused exhaustion, so for me, I freelance. So I keep sort of like my favorite clients, and I keep my toe in the water because I enjoy that. And it brings me confidence. I know that when I do that, I light up. It's game time. And when you're already feeling a little uncertain and unsure about what this next identity looks like, it's good to keep reminding yourself that you've done this before. You can get better at something new. Look at what happened with that. I think that's quite important. And there's research by psychologists, or the psychologist Dan Gilbert, that shows we greatly underestimate how much will change in the future, even if we fully acknowledge that we've changed considerably in the past, right?
That's so cool.
Isn't it good? Because our psychology continuously tricks us into believing that who we are right now in this very moment is here to stay. But no, the person that's meeting the challenges after the unexpected change is going to be different. You will be different. That's kind of a huge aha moment for me, and I think I love that too, right?
I love that. I absolutely love that. It's whether it's reminding yourself that you are great, you can be great, but also along with that, I love that you keep certain things, and they talk about that in resilience as well, where self-esteem is such an important thing, where you do certain things where you're using your skills and talents which you're really good at. You keep that going even if you're transitioning from that, so that it gives you confidence, it gives you good vibes in the other stuff that you're going. So I think that brings us to a really important thing, that this transition is strategic. It's not necessarily a leap of faith where you're just jumping and, hey, I don't like my job, I don't like anything. You're jumping. You are strategically working towards where you're headed. So in your strategic way, it's good to keep some things that you already have. explore other things. We're going to safeguard some stuff. We're going to explore things. And slowly, when we are ready, maybe we let go, or we never let go of some of the things that we're already good at, or they come in different forms. But it's not an all or nothing. It's like a startup. It's an iterative process where you just keep shifting, changing, keeping the greatness. Don't let the greatness in you go while evolving some other parts.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And so now I'd like to go a little bit deeper into your program, because you've touched on clarity earlier. I know you have sort of 4 key pillars, and I know people are going to be very interested now in how you take people through that journey. And the first, I think there's headspace, clarity, action, and momentum. How did you develop that? How do they tango together when someone is looking at the next stage of my career?
Right. So a lot of it came through the first few sessions, actually, because I had different frameworks which I put in the first few sessions.
And you asked for feedback, right? Which was great.
Yes. Those are free, and I asked for feedback, and I really appreciate the people who gave really good feedback in the first few sessions, which made me realize that I was putting different chunks together and I needed it to be a little more coherent. But as I got this information together, it struck me the key thing in this uncertain point is when people are changing is people need to have both headspace and clarity. And that's the core of the model. And I created this framework, which is the Headspace-Clarity framework. I've trademarked it, where we want to get, often people start with low clarity, I don't know where I'm going, and low headspace, where overwhelm happens. And this program takes you slowly towards a place of high headspace and high clarity. So then you can start thinking of it. We go block by block. The first block, which is overwhelm. When you're overwhelmed, there's no point thinking of where you want to go, because your intellectual skills, your prefrontal cortex is not working anymore. There's cortisol, you're stressed. All you need to do is get your headspace to a better place. Whether it is figuring out regulation tools, whether it is removing some people from your life, whether it is removing some content from your life, you need to get yourself. And then so in the headspace session, we look at what is affecting our headspace. First, we validate as people talk about it, then you realize everyone's in a similar place. We have certain tools to do that. Then we look at our overall headspace map. What are the drivers? What's affecting it right now in this critical time? And we try and control our headspace. Through all this, people start getting into a better headspace. So that's the first part, which to many people is I think one of the most important parts, because a lot of us don't talk about this and don't have a frame of doing it in the right way. The next is clarity. And I think the key insight I got from this, a little bit of what I shared, was in your 20s, you're looking at what's my career going to be, and your life works around your career. In your 40s, you're looking at what's my life going to be, and your career works around life. So we approach this from a life design standpoint, where we start very raw on what is important to you. And then we go into some of the things that I talked about in clarity mapping, the difficult questions. Yeah. And then we realize, how is our life right now? So there is a certain anchor that we have in terms of money. Money is an important topic that comes in clarity, which people don't want to talk about, because money enables what your life is right now. If something goes away, what is going to come? So strategically looking at clarity from life, money, what time, what do we want to look about, which then leads to a few hypotheses that these are 3 areas I want to go into, which come to me. So it could be 3 things that you have that, hey, I want to continue to do what I'm doing, but on the side, do something else, whatever your models come to. The next one is action and testing. And the way I like testing, and we talked about testing, the way I like testing is a framework that Jeff Bezos has in Amazon for decision making. I find that framework
the time in the morning?
No, I'll
the time when you make the best decisions?
He has a framework which I find even more powerful in personal growth. He calls it 2-way door experiments. So when people make, and if anyone there are a few people from Amazon who've come to my course and they light up when I talk about 2-way door experiments, because that's the way he functions. So he says, all right, you want to make this change. Is it a 2-way door experiment or a 1-way door experiment? A 2-way door experiment is you open the door, you go in, it doesn't work, you come back. A 1-way door experiment is you open the door, you go, there's no coming back. So for 2-way door experiments, you don't ask too many questions. You just do it. So for example, a 1-way door experiment could be, I quit my job and I'm not going back. Done. It's difficult maybe to go back. A 2-way door is, I keep my job, but I think I want to do speaking. Let me try and do one speaking gig. And it works, doesn't work. All right, done. I'll try something else. So the way you set up experiments, changing location is a big one. That's why I guess you thought about changing locations. So certain things are very big things. Certain things are small things. I encourage the starting point to have action plans for the next 90 days with two-way door experiments. So you're clarifying, and it could be conversations. You do a small project, and depends on where you are. If you're very exploratory, it's a lot of conversations with pointed questions with certain people. If you're a little more advanced, then it could be little mini projects that you do to ask yourself. And that's how you start getting more information through this framing. So that's action, where you create these two-way door experiments, what you're going to do for the next 90 days. Momentum is about story, because what happens is, when you've got somewhere that you want to go and you start going there, there's going to be ups and downs. And to make sure that we navigate that, we need a powerful meaning. So for me, maybe it was the dining table visual of somebody feeling bad trying to do this. But for others, it could be something else. What is that powerful meaning for yourself that is going to get you forward? So that is where we do a little bit meaning making. And that meaning is a longer. So in the first session where we did Headspace, we did the day-to-day Headspace, the easy ones to manage. Like you're applying for a job and a bad call comes, how do you get yourself back and get into work the next day? So these are the small ones. These are the short-term loops. But there's a longer-term loop. And the longer-term loop could look like, for some people, like there was this guy at Google who was part of the course. And I loved what he said. Like when we did this whole meaning kind of exercise, for him, the meaning was that things are so tough for me, but I want my kids to look at their dad and say, when things were the most difficult, he put his head up and he worked really hard to get back on. And now that meaning to him makes him work hard, gives him energy to go on. For someone else, it could be something else. So that is a session of creating. You're in this place right now. We're all in some difficulty. What is the story that can play in our head, which is going to light us up and make it easier? Because often, if you don't consciously make that story, and that's part of psychology, which is narrative storytelling, which sits in your head, the story that sits could be a fear. Oh my God, what's going to happen? I'm not going to lose my job. I'm not going to be able to get a job. Or it could be victim. The world is against me. This is what has happened to me. Or it could be jealousy, which is very normal, that these guys are doing well and I'm left behind. All those are normal and they will happen. But we want to create a bigger anchor story, which could try and sit there most of the time, which of course you will keep going back to all these comparisons and others. That's rites of passage. Jealousy is rites of passage. All these are rites of passage that is going to happen. But can we also get another powerful story that could sit there, which is going to help you through the ups and downs? So that is that part. With this, then people go out, do their experiments, do their stuff. And the first feeling is it's from overwhelm to I feel lighter. I feel, I can do it. It's not like the whole problem is solved, but I know now I can do it. I have some frameworks. I have some tools. I know what to do. I know somebody's broken down this process for me. So that's how it kind of works.
Oh my goodness. I'm so excited because I am taking this course, folks. Okay. Join me. Maybe it's not the same cohort. And also, Sharad, what's great is you really light up, huh? This is you. This is where you're meant to be. And again, it took several iterations. It took a 6-month pause to and of course, I love that you were open for feedback. You also experimented and said, hey, here's what I've got. What works, what doesn't work? Let me reframe that into something that's more coherent. And it seems to really be taking off. And so I'll skip a few questions ahead because it's related to this. I mean, you've helped so many people also through your nonprofit, right? You've helped over 500 professionals land roles at companies like Uber, BCG, and Bloomberg. But I'd love to ask what's been the most rewarding encounter, whether it was through this Thrive Through Transition course or in another element of where you were helping other senior leaders, where someone came to you for support and you can look back at that moment or that encounter and say, I feel really proud. I helped so-and-so get here or have this epiphany or this experience.
What comes to mind, and maybe because the story is, I think it was this Google guy who'd come to my course, and it's not that he's found a job right now, but it was just seeing him shift emotionally from stage 1 to the last stage. Problems haven't gone away. It's not like a beautiful success case study. So I don't even put it as a case study. But seeing him shift, seeing him realize that it's happening, and the poor guy was taking the burden of his whole family and everything. They'd relocated, and it was really tough. And I think just the little bit that I could help him feel a little better, unpack a lot of this, get some confidence, get a deeper meaning, and go. I think right now that comes to me as maybe it's recency effect as something that I felt really proud of, which is not something you'll write about. It's not something that you put in stories, but it's just the person's face at the start and the end.
Yes. It's the inflection point, right? It's the turning points that are fascinating and interesting. I mean, even transitions, I know that they get kickstarted usually sometimes with a profound big event or a big moment, or in small moments that are built over time. It's when you know something is shifting, and you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to have it mapped, but you know you are shifting, and that validation of I'm moving. I'm actually moving now. I'm not stuck. By the way, I always like to tell people you're not so stuck. You're in transition.
Yes.
Right. And I don't know if I can ask this, okay? But because I've been curious. I looked on your podcast website, and because when we're talking about mission and feeling grateful for being able to help others and allow yourself to be a vehicle for change in a way. You referenced on your podcast site about a personal loss a decade ago that transformed your life's mission. And because I can sort of really see you living it now, I hope you don't mind. I am curious whether you could share a bit about that.
Yeah, so that was really, really tragic. So maybe I'll just share a little bit about it.
Yes,
so
whatever you're comfortable with, of course.
Maybe a little bit, it might. So I lost, this was 12 years back, I lost my loved ones, people in my family who passed away. And that completely shattered my world. And it took me many, many years to recover, but it's like losing people in your family who are part of your life. And yeah, it was really, really tragic. And it was like, up till that point, everything was great. I was going one achievement after the other, performing well. And that is when everyone has the inflection point of asking bigger questions. So that is when I started asking, what are we meant to do in life? What matters? Which then took me on this journey towards purpose and how we're supposed to live, and then resilience, and all these things opened up from there. So that was like a big event in life, which was just very, very difficult.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it usually is moments where, well, Bruce Feiler calls it a life quake, right? And we have different life quakes in our life. It's the ones that really destabilize us, right? And it takes a while for that to actually shift into a perspective that we can run with and understand.
Yes.
But it forces us. It's when life forces us to evolve. Right?
Absolutely.
Which I'm glad it did for you, at least in the sense that you looked and you said, okay, where is my energy and my time better spent in order to feel proud of the life that you're living, right? Because it's a gift.
Nikki. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I hope I didn't overstep here, but I always do wonder
Nikki.
what these inflection points look like. You know?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I appreciate that. And also, I am conscious of time. I could be here for hours with you, but you would not like that because you are in a different time zone, and it's probably gin o'clock where you are at this point. But if you don't mind, I'll ask one or two more things, and then we'll wrap up, because you touched on money earlier, which is really there's so much fear around it. There's so much fear around money. But at the same time, I also read something, and of course it's all different, right? Whether you're living in the reality of a developing nation, depending on the type of job that you have, your responsibilities, these perspectives around money will be different. But there was a stat here I wanted to share with you. Okay, that I found fascinating is learning that for some people who are serious about a work change, sometimes what they view as a step forward actually comes with a step backward in salary,
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting because there's these two researchers out of Toronto, Jing Hu and Jacob Hirsch, found that if workers consider a job meaningful, they're willing to accept salaries that are 32% lower than for unmeaningful work. And my husband was quick to agree. He's like, yeah, I'll even take 50%, which terrified me because we live in Zurich. I said, this is fascinating for my research, but hold on to your horses.
Yeah.
I mean, this doesn't seem to surprise you. This has come up maybe in some of your
It
sessions?
absolutely has come up, and I think that is why I have this discussion. So I'll relate it exactly to you. This certainly happens. Many of us, and I've seen people also do that, either don't take the promotion or take a lateral move where their salary doesn't go up, or take a move downwards where their salary goes downwards so they can have more time to do things that they want to do, whether it's with their family and stuff. So I think that certainly happens, especially in Singapore. I've seen it happen. The other thing that you mentioned, and that sometimes happens as a next step when people do my program, especially after they do the clarity mapping, is a conversation with spouse. Because you might want to do that, but the issue with 40s is that you might have a spouse, you might have kids, and your decision...
And a mortgage.
And a mortgage, and your decision around getting less income. We talked about, the anchor. Your income that you're getting right now creates the anchor on which your family life lives. And
Yes.
if that goes down, the anchor could go down, and then you have a responsibility to, your husband and your spouse or your kids to figure then, if it's a husband taking whoever it is, that now, do we all live with a lower salary? Is everyone okay to it? And maybe it's okay, but there's a conversation needed. Or do we dip into our savings, but we know our anchor keeps going down, but in 2-3 years, I'll try and get it back. What is going to happen? So that at minimum requires a conversation or a few conversations, which do not happen in 20s because many of us are part of a system now versus by ourselves doing whatever the hell we want.
Absolutely. And I think that's part and parcel of when you start to become interested in who you are becoming, right? Not just the work that you do. We talked about this. It's who you are becoming and also the sacrifices you are willing to make to build that future self. And that therefore these conversations need to happen. Yeah, it's different. It's not a one-man show or a one-woman show anymore, often in your 40s. So, that was also new for me. I'm recently married, only 2 years. And I realize now, my God, I actually have to ask whether I can do this, or, it's these things because it's
part of a system. And even your husband will have to ask. It's both sides, because what starts from income from others becomes part of a system, and any change needs to be. So we want to be independent, but we also like love and community and family. So that balancing act is a rites of passage. And you can talk to, I've been married for 8-9 years, and it's a constant act, which you ask anyone, it's a constant act. And I guess it is, to me, it's worth it once you've got the right things going and you're able to have that conversation, but it could take some time to make it worth it. But that's part of this whole system versus being by yourself.
Absolutely. And again, because it is such a sticky subject, depending on where you are emotionally and psychologically, it can bring up a lot.
Oh, 100%.
So it's hopefully that, you build enough trust and communication with your partner that you can look at this level-headedly, because it can cause a lot of stress and argument and disagreement, right? So it's just knowing that this has to happen. If you want to go take a pay cut because something feels right in your bones, and I hope your partner will support you, but there are real practicalities that have to be discussed, and hopefully in a calm manner, because it can always go a little askew. I think we've all been there.
And if it goes askew, are we able to bring it back? Because it will, something will. And being calm, as well as if we're the ones who disengage, then being calm may not be the best thing for us. Let us voice what's there in a nice way, because otherwise we will repent, or we'll have these things that, we didn't talk, we'll be resentful because we didn't speak up. So there's so many of these complications. My God, that can be another podcast, but
I think it should be. I really think so. I definitely know I want to do an episode on finances, actually, and what happens when
money is
you go
the
from
biggest
having a lot
instigator of fights between couples. It is the biggest, because people don't want to talk about it. You feel petty when you're talking about it, but it's the reality of things move because of that. So it is such a big one that I always bring it in my course, and I always say, talk to your spouse. Like you have to, because my job is even to bring out things that you don't want to talk about, because with all this reinvention involving, it is going to be a huge factor. So you have to have this conversation. And people hate it when I put that thing that this is your anchor, it's going to go down, it's going to go up, whatever. They hate it, but my job is to put it out there.
Oh, I'm so glad. And yeah, I've never actually attended a program or a course that says, please involve the people whose lives will be changed by your decisions in the process.
It's not unilateral. Yes.
Not just you who's going through this. It's true. The change that you go through affects everyone around you.
Absolutely.
Because we are not solitary beings. And money is a hot topic. Oh my.
Huge.
Oh boy. Oh
Huge.
boy, we could go on for days, and I look forward to hopefully having you back again on this note. But really appreciate your time. You're such a gold mine of insight, and for those of you listening, if this conversation has resonated with you, I highly recommend you take a look at Sharad's Thrive Through Transition course. It's 4 weeks, right? Virtually online program, in depth, 90-minute Zoom sessions is what you can expect. Tell us why you keep it nice and intimate. I love the idea that you take a max of 6 participants.
Yeah. Because a large part of it is people talking and opening up. And I've done these types of sessions in the corporate world. When there are many, then the intimacy and opening up does not happen. What a lot of people realize, like in the beginning, that, hey, I'm going through this, other people are going through the same thing, hearing their stories, that's a big one. And then also this whole insights, a lot of the learning doesn't come from me, it'll actually come from other people in the session, because they will suddenly think of things. And if you have a smaller group, and when they're working with certain tools and frameworks, they'll say something that could affect you more than me saying something. So, but that will only happen if the group size is small. If it's bigger, then that interaction is lower. So that's what I realized, at least for now, works well.
Absolutely. And if you're going to be vulnerable, which this process will require you to be,
100% it does.
It's a lot easier to do it with a
smaller group. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is perfect. So we're going to make sure we put the link to that course in the show
I'll
notes,
send that
folks.
to you.
Please. Yes. Sharad Lal, you're a star. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you very much. As always, great energy. Love speaking with you. Thank you very much for having me in the podcast.